Continuing conflict. The fighting between Russia and Ukraine is in its 8th day. We have reports from neighboring Poland, plus how the White House is responding. Offering help. How a Catholic group is aiding those fleeing the violence in Ukraine. Religious freedom. A former Secretary of Education tells us why she's supporting a case regarding prayer in school. And communion of saints. One priest's unique ministry to strengthen devotion among the faithful. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, March 3rd, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this feast of St. Catherine Drexel. I'm Tracy Sabol. It is the 8th day of violence in Ukraine, but Russia's foreign minister says that he is confident that a solution to the military conflict will be found.
Всем понятно, что Третья мировая может быть только ядерной. Но обращаю ваше внимание,
in a video conference with reporters, Sergei Lavrov also denied that the Kremlin is planning to use nuclear weapons. Another round of peace talks took place today. Meantime, the violence continues. The city of Mariupol came under attack as Russia makes inroads in southern Ukraine. Philip Crowther, Associated Press international affiliate reporter, joins us now from the Poland-Ukraine border. Philip, good to see you. Tell us what you're seeing right now. What is the situation like at the Poland-Ukraine border?
Well, look, it's a humanitarian crisis. We already know that, but we see it here in person. I'm in Przemyśl. This is the closest town to the Poland-Ukraine border in this part of the area. And you can see the train station right behind me. This is one of the places where thousands of refugees have arrived since the war began only a week ago now. That's almost impossible to comprehend, isn't it? And what's really amazing here is that there is still train traffic between the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, and here inside of Poland, meaning that those thousands of people still have that opportunity to leave their country and reach a safer place. Now, what's maybe even more astounding is that these trains don't return to Kiev entirely empty. There are those who are trying to get on these trains and get back to Ukraine. Now, those are mainly men who've decided to go home and defend their families and defend their country. I should mention that almost all of the refugees we are seeing here, at least those who are Ukrainian, are women and children, because Ukrainian men between the ages of 18 and 60 are simply not allowed to leave the country.
Philip, tell us some of the stories that you've been hearing from people there.
Yeah, they're pretty devastating stories, and a lot of them end in tears, literally, when you have these conversations, again, mainly with women, mothers, for example, who bring their young children over here, over the border to Poland, a safe country for them, of course. One example, a lady who was here with her 5-year-old son. She had fled the capital, Kiev, and has not heard from her husband in quite a while, she said. She told me this while she was crying, and the reason why is her husband is a reservist in the Ukrainian army. She supposes he's at the front line somewhere, but does not know that at this point. Now, all of these women and children, some men, of course, who are not Ukrainian, coming here to the Polish border town of Przemyśl after a very, very treacherous journey for a lot of them. Those journeys can take up to 4 or 5 days to get from their starting point all the way to here. Very full trains, very full buses. And what they do here is they try and find another way out of here to maybe link up with family members in another part of Poland or in another part of Europe. So it's turned into a bit of a transport hub here, in fact, to get those people to an even safer and more comfortable place.
And Philip, before I let you go, can you talk to us about the situation in Ukraine, what it's like on the ground there? What do you know?
Well, look, the truth is that the situation on the ground in Ukraine indicates to us that this humanitarian crisis could get significantly worse over the next few days and weeks and maybe even months. As you've already mentioned, there is fighting going on in the southeastern city of Mariupol. There is fighting around the town of Kherson, that's in the south of Ukraine, with the Russian army saying that they now control it. bombing is going on from the Russian armed forces. It's a very dire picture that is being painted in Ukraine right now, meaning that probably more people will feel the need to escape Ukraine. And as you mentioned also at the top there, what we have heard from the French presidency about a call between the French President Emmanuel Macron and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin is not good news. In that call, according to the French presidency, Vladimir Putin said that he will not stop before he has complete control of Ukraine. Remember that there are a lot of Ukrainians, a lot like those men I just mentioned, who are returning to Kiev to fight for their country, who are willing to fight despite the odds being very much against them.
Now, very, very concerning situation. Philip, thank you so much for your reporting. Please stay safe.
Thank you.
A new report says around 1 million people have fled Ukraine since the fighting began, and Catholic groups are among those trying to help the refugees. Caritas has launched an emergency appeal for help. It is seeking funds to aid around 13,000 people who are trying to flee the violence. Joining us now from Ukraine is Tatiana Stanichi, president of Caritas Ukraine. Tatiana, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Would you mind giving us an update on the situation in Ukraine right now, and also tell us, how you're doing and your coworkers as well?
I'm so proud of the way that our organization has been responding immediately to the crisis. But staff are still trickling in from other locations. We did some relocations. And now we had an emergency immediate response ready when it started. And so we started working on that immediately. And now we're slowing down a little bit, regrouping, and seeing what it is that we should do next.
And in what ways is Caritas able to help those that are affected by all of this violence?
So the thing that we were preparing for hypothetically, should something happen, we realized that there would be a mass movement of people. So we were preparing for internally displaced persons moving across the country. We had done some pre-planning, and we were ready to put that in place as soon as something started. So we've had welcome centers through different local centers throughout the country. So they receive people who are on the move, who are shifting towards the border. We're providing hot meals, hot tea, a warm place to warm up, some place where they can sleep overnight that's dry. And most of these people are in transit, so they're not staying. At least that's how it's been up until now in the first wave of people fleeing. You probably know that close to 1 million people have already crossed the border. We were also helping, so in addition to these centers throughout Ukraine, helping people as they're in transit, we've also been working at the borders. There was a big surge of especially women and children trying to cross the border on foot, which was creating problems. So we set up tents and also provided food, hot tea, and then also opportunities for people to get warmed up.
Yeah, it's such a tragic situation what's happening right now. Before we let you go, I know that you recently said when the violence ends, things in Ukraine may not go back to normal. What are your fears for the country once everything is over?
I think what's been amazing, in the last 8 days is, of course, there's a shock. You can see that sometimes people are still shocked, and there's a big tension in the country. But at the same time, we're seeing a huge solidarity and outpouring of people helping one another. And I think that it's like a hidden gift in all of this. And I think that that's the piece that's going to help to restore and rebuild when the war ends.
Well, Tatiana, please know that we're all praying for you and praying for everyone in Ukraine, and wishing you all well. So thank you so much for your time today, and God bless you.
Okay, thank you.
And for more information or to provide assistance to Caritas Ukraine, visit their website, caritas.org/donate now. Helping Ukraine in the military conflict requires money. And tonight, President Joe Biden, while punishing more Russian oligarchs today, is asking Congress for billions of more dollars for Ukraine. The White House says the funding is urgently needed. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, $10 billion. That's how much the Biden administration says is needed right now for humanitarian, security, and economic assistance. And that's on top of the $1.4 billion the U.S. has already provided Ukraine in the past year.
As war rages in Ukraine, here a shell hitting a large oil depot in a city north of Kyiv. President Joe Biden today meets with his cabinet at the White House.
Our interest is in maintaining the strongest unified economic impact campaign that on Putin in all history. And I think we're well on the way to doing that.
Also today, President Biden spoke virtually with the prime ministers of Australia, Japan, and India, the Indo-Pacific Alliance, also known as the Quad. And the White House says they talked about Ukraine and they reaffirmed their commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. And at Joint Base Andrews, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken flies off, visiting several European countries. First stop today, a meeting of NATO foreign ministers. Later, he'll meet with Ukrainian refugees fleeing the violence. And in the press briefing room today, more details on the administration's plan to help Ukraine.
One of the reasons the president pushed to expedite the delivery or the approval and delivery of a security package over the weekend was to give them, the Ukrainians, more support.
Also today, another round of talks between the Russians and the Ukrainians, the location undisclosed. Both sides shaking hands, but the war not stopping. And direct diplomacy between the U.S. and Russia is on hold.
And right now, they're invading a sovereign country and continuing to escalate every day. We're never going to take diplomacy ever off the table, but again, now's not the moment for that.
President Biden is also speaking out about a transgender debate in Texas. Governor Greg Abbott says some gender treatments go too far and should count as child abuse. But the president claims Texas is attacking those kids and their parents. At least one case has already gone to court. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, lawmakers weigh in on President Biden's State of the Union speech. Plus, the private prayers of a coach will have a day at the Supreme Court. A former U.S. Secretary of Education is part of an amicus brief in a religious freedom case. The case involves a high school football coach who was fired for silently praying after every game. Former U.S. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos says in part, quote, if a teacher or coach cannot silently pray while employed at a public school, what is left of the First Amendment for them? The idea that the separation of church and state is some sort of invitation for the government to forcefully separate people from their faith is appalling. And joining me now is Betsy DeVos, former Secretary of Education. Secretary DeVos, welcome back. So great to see you. For those who aren't that familiar with this case, you're welcome. Can you quickly tell us more about it and also why you decided to get involved in co-writing an amicus brief?
Sure. Well, Coach Joe Kennedy, for a long time, had a habit of, after his football games, going to the center of the field and taking a knee and silently praying after the game, not coercing or encouraging or suggesting that anyone else should join him, but of course welcoming anyone who did. And the school district told him he had to stop doing that. And he was going to have to choose between continuing to do that or being fired. And so this case has made its way all the way to the Supreme Court. And I'm very hopeful that the Supreme Court will once again reaffirm an individual's right and privilege to be able to express their faith openly and without, without worry of being fired or ostracized in some other way. This is a very fundamental religious freedom First Amendment issue, and it's just a shame that it has gone this far, but the Supreme Court has decided to hear the case.
Yeah, and talk to us a little bit more about why this case is so important when it comes to religious freedom. Well,
I think our freedoms as people of faith have been under assault from many different angles for a long time, and this is just another important test of that. The First Amendment guarantees each of us that we can freely and openly practice our faith and our religious beliefs. But somehow that's gotten twisted by many along the way to suggest that government somehow has to keep people from expressing faith in a public setting or public sphere in any way. So when a case like this comes all the way up to the Supreme Court, and a teacher or a coach like Coach Kennedy is threatened with either deciding between keeping his job or being able to practice his faith, it is a very fundamental First Amendment issue, religious freedom issue, and it's an important one, a foundational one on which this country was founded, and so many people fled their native homes and countries coming to this country to be able to practice their faith openly.
Yeah, and I know this isn't your first time advocating for religious freedom at public schools. Can you tell us a little bit about why you used your role as Education Secretary to ensure that the First Amendment was upheld?
Well, sure. We took several steps to, again, reaffirm and reassert the importance of religious freedom and the First Amendment while I was in office. One of the things we did was reaffirm through updated guidance an individual's right to be able to pray in a public school. That is a right that cannot or should not be taken away from anyone, Coach Kennedy among them. And we updated the guidance to, again, make sure all public schools know what their obligations and responsibilities are in that regard. For higher education institutions, we reaffirmed through guidance, updated guidance again, that a faith-based school's mission is one that can and should be pursued and upheld without fear of having their accreditation yanked. Another area that we pursued and updated and reaffirmed for institutions was competitive grants, particularly in the higher ed world. Many faith-based institutions, and I think a number of the HBCUs in particular, were being denied the opportunity to apply for some of these competitive grants because of their faith-based mission. We took that to task and pointed out the unconstitutionality of it, and that was corrected, and those institutions now have every opportunity to apply for grants as well.
We have a little less than a minute left, but I want to talk about this. I know you have a book that's coming out this summer. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Love to. It's called Hostages No More. And it's really my story about the fight for education freedom and the future of the American child. I've been fighting for education freedom and the right for parents to choose the best fit for their child's education at the K-12 level for over 30 years. And that continued while I was serving in Washington. And so this is going to be a compilation of a little bit memoir, a lot about the policies that we have pursued and stories about schools I've visited. And then, importantly, where I think we need to go from here. And this is a really important moment in time where families are feeling more than ever the need to have the control and say over their kids' education. And this will give parents and families some tools to be able to do that.
Well, Secretary DeVos, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. So good to be with you today.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, on Capitol Hill, lawmakers continue to weigh in on President Joe Biden's State of the Union address. While Republicans say he came up short, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was pleased with what she heard.
The President of the United States delivered a State of the Union address that gave the American people hope and confidence in their future, had empathy for those who are still suffering from the aftermath of COVID.
But Senate Minority Whip John Thune tells EWTN News Nightly that the president glossed over kitchen table issues.
Him missing the broader point about the issues that are, of deep concern to the American people, and that would namely be inflation, gas prices, the border, crime in our cities, and an energy policy.
Others say they see holes in the administration's energy policy.
Why in heaven's sake are we still buying Russian oil? We could stop that today. We are sending Russia $75 million every day.
Up next, a Catholic priest tells us why he travels the country with relics of more than 150 saints. The Vatican says Pope Francis will travel to Africa at the beginning of July. The Holy Father will visit the Democratic Republic of the Congo, followed by a first-ever papal visit to South Sudan. Next month, the 85-year-old will visit Malta. The Vatican has accepted the resignation of the Bishop of Peoria, Illinois. Bishop Daniel Janke turned 75 years old today. He had served in Peoria for 20 years. The diocese in the central part of the state serves nearly 200,000 Catholics and was home to Bishop Fulton Sheen. And finally tonight, a Catholic priest has visited nearly 200 dioceses around the world, but he does not travel alone. Father Carlos Martins travels with the relics of more than 150 saints. It's part of an initiative called Treasures of the Church, and it's a unique way of bringing healing and help to the faithful. And joining me now is Father Carlos Martins, Director of Treasures of the Church. Father, welcome. So great to see you. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Treasures of the Church and how it began?
Sure. Yeah. So Treasures of the Church is it's a healing and evangelization ministry whereby I use the relics of the saints to give people an experience of the living God. And what I mean by that is there are healings at every exposition. Some of them are very dramatic. There can be tumors that disappear on sight. People who have some disability that they've carried their whole lives, deafness, blindness, those have disappeared at expositions. This ministry began in the latter half of the 1990s. I'm a convert from atheism myself. I had an experience with relics shortly after that. I wanted to give everybody that experience.
That's very incredible. One thing I understand is that relics are particularly venerated in the Orthodox Church and the Eastern Rite of the Catholic Church. Do you think enough attention is paid to the relics in the Latin Rite?
Well, I mean, in a sense, yes and no. At every liturgy, we pay relics reverence. The reason why the priest venerates, why he kisses the altar at the start and at the end of Mass, is because it is customary to place saints' relics inside every church altar. And so when he offers that act of reverence, what he is doing is he is greeting the saints for their presence. But in the general consciousness, for the last 60 years or so, relics have been relegated to the place of those things that seem superfluous or unimportant. But they are at the heart of the Church's theology, and they are proof, if you will, of the truth of the faith, because the saints are incarnate within Christ. And the fact that that our Lord continues to work the miraculous in the presence of their relics, the fact that demons find them abhorrent, and the fact that the mere presence of a relic is exorcistic to a demon, is proof of the words of our Lord, is proof of the truth of the faith, but in fact of his words that greater works than what I do, you will do.
And Father, if you don't mind, can you describe to us, some of the relics that you have and which ones in particular stand out to you?
Sure. Well, I mean, they're all very important because they're all members of the body of Christ, to put it into biblical language. The current exhibit consists of 165 relics in this Vatican-sponsored exhibit, and it includes saints from every one of the church's periods. So saints from New Testament times, such as all of the Apostles, Mary Magdalene, the Church Fathers, saints from the early Middle Ages, the latter Middle Ages, the Renaissance of the Church, Age of the Enlightenment, if you will, and including some of the most modern canonized and beatified persons. So, for example, the exposition includes a recently acquired relic of Blessed Carlo Acutis, that was provided by his mother.
Yeah. And before I let you go, Father, if people would like more information, where can they find that, and where can they go to see the relics?
Sure. So more information can be found on the website, treasuresofthechurch.com. Currently, the ministry is in Washington, D.C. From here, it will move on to Virginia, the Carolinas, and then the southern states.
Well, Father Martins, thank you so much for speaking with us today, and God bless you. We appreciate your time and sharing all of this with us.
You are most welcome. Thank you, and God bless you.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night, and God bless.